So what happens when you build this massive 50-story corporate skyscraper, but you build it on a foundation of just profound childhood trauma?
You mean like structurally?
Yeah, exactly. Think about it for a second. You pour the concrete for this incredibly ambitious building, but the concrete itself it's literally mixed with the agonizing pain of early rejection.
Right, which is a terrible mix.
It's the worst. And at first, you don't even notice the cracks, right? The building goes up. It looks spectacular from the outside.
Shimmering glass,
Yeah.
a beautiful lobby.
Exactly. But as you add the 10 stories of a career and then the 20 stories of a marriage and, 50 stories of massive financial success, that flawed foundation begins to bear a weight it was never, ever psychologically designed to hold.
Yeah, it's just physics at that point. Or, well, psychological physics.
Right. And eventually, no matter how shiny that glass is, the entire structure is going to sway in the wind.
And if that foundation isn't, excavated and actually repaired, the collapse isn't just a possibility, it's a mathematical certainty.
It really is. So welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. Today, we're looking at the blueprint of a man who built that exact skyscraper, felt it begin to collapse, and then somehow figured out how to completely reconstruct his foundation.
It's a wild story.
We're unpacking a deeply personal autobiography. It's titled Livro Pastor, written by Chris Storck.
And Chris Storck, that's a name that resonates heavily in the Brazilian corporate world.
Oh, absolutely.
For 27 years, he climbed the ranks of these major national companies, and he ultimately became a really highly sought-after executive.
But today, his business card looks very different, doesn't it?
Totally different. Now, he's a master coach, he's a mentor to entrepreneurs, and an international speaker. And what's really fascinating here is that his autobiography isn't some standard, sterile, how to succeed in business manual.
Why, we get enough of those.
Exactly. It's a raw psychological study of a leader who achieved everything for the absolute wrong reasons, completely burned out his internal engine, and had to rebuild his entire leadership philosophy from the ground up.
So our mission today is to extract the actual mechanics of that transformation. We want to understand how the devastating rejection by a father and the unimaginable tragedy of losing a twin brother can completely rewire a person's drive.
And more importantly for you, the listener, whether you're a startup founder feeling the sting of burnout or an executive struggling to connect with your team.
Or just someone dragging the invisible baggage of your own childhood right into the boardroom.
Right. We are going to look at the specific, hard-won methods Chris uses today to apply emotional intelligence and spiritual principles to modern corporate leadership.
Yeah. So to understand Chris the Master Coach, we really have to travel back to the origins of Cristiano the Survivor.
The origin story.
Yeah, and the story begins in the 1970s in this historic small town called Muki in the Brazilian state of Espírito Santo.
And his father was a young, very charismatic German dentist who had just moved to the town. He was highly regarded professionally, but his personal life was pretty chaotic.
To put it mildly.
Yeah, he was entangled in multiple romantic relationships.
And that chaos quickly turned incredibly dark. The father is actually accused of a severe crime abusing a minor.
Right.
He's placed under house arrest, he's receiving death threats, and a notoriously strict judge is transferred to the town just to oversee the case.
It's a total scandal.
Mm.
And right in the middle of this swirling hurricane of chaos, Chris's mother, who was a local school teacher approaching her 30s, decides she desperately wants a child.
Which is quite the timing.
Yeah, the text describes her mindset during this period as almost transactional. She wasn't looking for a partner, really. She was looking for a biological provider to fulfill this intense desire for motherhood.
Right.
So she becomes pregnant. But when she presents this news to the father, his reaction is just total self-preservation.
Mm.
Facing prison and public ruin, he outright refuses to acknowledge the child.
He just flees. Right.
He flees to the south of Brazil, entirely abandoning Chris's mother before the birth even happens.
Total, absolute abandonment. And the physical toll of this stress on the mother, it's unimaginable. And she eventually discovers she isn't just having one baby, she is having twins.
And the birth itself is a harrowing medical event. They're at a public hospital in the capital city of Vitória, and the babies are positioned in the shape of a cross inside the womb.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The first baby, Christopher, is delivered safely. But the second baby, Chris, suffers severe complications. He is actually asphyxiated by the anesthesia used during the procedure.
That's terrifying.
He's born practically lifeless. He fails to cry or breathe for several terrifying minutes.
It's an absolute miracle he even survives the delivery room. His mother names him Cristiano, which translates to follower of Christ.
She has no idea the weight that name will carry decades later.
Exactly. And for the first few years, she pours her entire soul into these boys. Being a single mother in a small countryside town in the 1970s carried a massive social stigma, but she completely defied it.
She did. She paraded them around in a double stroller, dressing them perfectly. It was like they were her shield against the town's judgment.
But that fragile peace is completely shattered by an event that permanently alters the family's psychological landscape. Chris and Christopher are 4 years old.
Just 4.
Yeah. They are walking home from kindergarten with their nanny, and they have this playful daily routine where they race the last stretch to see who can get the first hug from their mother who's waiting for them.
And Christopher, who the text describes as the more mischievous of the two, bites the nanny's hand to break free.
Just a little kid trying to win a race.
Right. He runs out into the street, bolting toward his mother.
Mhm.
And he is struck by a speeding car.
Oh, man. And Chris is standing right there on the sidewalk, holding the nanny's hand, just watching his mirror image get violently thrown to the pavement.
Chris actually loses consciousness from the sheer shock of the trauma.
I can't even imagine. And Christopher suffers a traumatic burn injury and passes away a few days later in a larger hospital.
The loss of a twin at any age is a profound trauma, obviously. But witnessing it at age 4, that creates a permanent neurological imprint.
Definitely.
However, it's the mother's reaction to this tragedy that truly pours the cracked concrete of Chris's foundation. She completely collapses.
Yeah, she turns her agony against God, right? Declaring that a loving deity wouldn't take her child.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But far more devastatingly, she turns her unresolved grief into active resentment toward Chris, the surviving twin.
As a parent, reading those passages in the book, it is physically difficult to process. She looks at Chris, this little boy who is also mourning his brother, and she basically uses him as a punching bag for her grief.
It's awful. She
Yeah.
would tell him, "You're ugly, your brother was handsome, your hair is coarse, your brother's was straight."
And the absolute worst thing you can tell a child, you'll never be anything in life. Your brother would have been a great man.
Every single year on his birthday, she would remind him that she was only happy he was born because it reminded her of the son she actually wanted. If we look at this through the lens of developmental psychology, this is catastrophic. A child's primary caregiver is their mirror to the world.
Right, and if the mirror reflects that you are unwanted, defective, and just a poor substitute for a ghost, your self-esteem doesn't just dip, it is entirely eradicated.
Completely wiped out. So Chris develops this desperate, gaping need for validation. If he's fundamentally unacceptable just for existing, he has to, earn his right to breathe through extreme actions.
Which perfectly explains the street fighting. By first grade, Chris is a terror. He is getting into brawls, he's manufacturing ninja stars to throw at kids, he joins local fighting clubs.
Ninja stars in first grade.
Yeah, he is actively seeking out violence.
And the fighting serves a dual purpose here. On the surface, he rationalizes it as defending himself and others, often taking beatings from much older boys, but subconsciously is a desperate bid for attention.
If you cannot extract love from an absent father or a resentful mother, you will settle for fear and notoriety from your peers.
Exactly. Aggression is just a deeply misguided cry for visibility.
Meanwhile, the family's material reality is crashing just as fast as their emotional one. His mother, drowning in depression, starts making these catastrophic financial decisions just to maintain a facade of wealth.
Right. She buys luxury items on credit she can't pay back.
And they lose everything. Chris describes nights where his mother would mix raw flour and sugar just to put something in their stomachs. She'd tell him, "Son, sleep, because sleep feeds you."
Oh, that's heartbreaking. They fall to the absolute bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. They're evicted from their home. And the few possessions they have left are tossed into a literal subterranean storage space.
It's a basement.
A dark, damp basement infested with rats and termites.
Ugh.
His mother would sit in that basement and just weep as she watched their remaining physical connection to a normal life rot away.
And that basement really becomes the defining metaphor for Chris's internal life. He's a teenager, technically homeless, relying on the charity of relatives, and he's just filled with this volcanic rage.
Naturally, he gravitates toward older, marginalized kids. They listen to heavy metal, they give him nicknames like Dog and Of the Darkness.
Very edgy teenager stuff, but with real consequences.
Yeah, the environment escalates from fistfights to switchblades, broken bottles, and heavy inhalant drugs. He is standing on the absolute precipice of becoming a permanent casualty of the streets.
But this is the moment a crucial intervention occurs. A kid named Wagner, who they nicknamed Carioca because of his Rio de Janeiro accent, starts hanging around.
But karaoke is different. He carries a completely different frequency. He talks openly about having a profound spiritual encounter with God.
And Chris's initial reaction is pure hostility, right? Because his mother had previously been taken advantage of by a religious group claiming they could contact his dead brother.
Right, which only deepened her trauma.
So Chris mercilessly mocks Carioca. He refers to Carioca and his Christian friends as the mad ones. He thinks they're totally delusional.
But underneath that mockery is an intense curiosity. Chris is exhausted. The adrenaline of the streets is wearing off, leaving only the cold reality of his basement life.
So one evening, he actually accepts an invitation to a gathering at the home of a German man named Wilfried. And Chris expects a bizarre cult. He walks in prepared to fight or flee.
But instead, he finds a group of young people sitting around, playing acoustic guitars, and singing softly about peace.
The juxtaposition completely short-circuits his brain. He is wired for threat detection, switchblades, and screaming metal. And here is absolute tranquility.
He literally thinks to himself, these guys are crazier than the crazy people I know.
Right. But then someone stands up and shares a very simple message. And they use a specific phrase that acts like a skeleton key to Chris's mind. God is a father, and he cares.
We really have to pause and analyze why that specific word pierced his armor.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
Chris had built an impregnable fortress around his emotions. But that fortress was constructed solely to defend the gaping, bleeding wound of fatherlessness.
Absolutely.
When he hears the word father applied to a God who doesn't abandon his children, the walls don't just crack, they vaporize.
He hears that, and his internal monologue just screams, Father! I don't have a father. I want that. I need that father. It isn't a theological debate for him. It's a desperate grab for a psychological anchor.
And he prays a prayer of surrender right there in that house.
Mm-hmm.
And the group has this tradition of picking a random Bible verse from a promise box.
Oh, I love this detail.
Yeah, Chris pulls out 2 Corinthians 5.1 C's, therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new.
That verse offers him the one thing he didn't think was possible. A blank slate. He leaves that house experiencing a sensation he has literally never felt in his entire life, peace.
He begins talking to God in his room, not as a distant abstract deity, but as a literal present father. He asks this father to teach him character, to be his ultimate reference point for how to be a man.
And this is where the story gets incredibly nuanced. Accepting a new spiritual identity doesn't instantly rewire 2 decades of trauma.
No, of course not.
The cracked concrete is still sitting at the bottom of his psyche. And a few years later, at age 18, that trauma violently reasserts itself. Chris is trying to enter the workforce, but he faces a massive bureaucratic humiliation.
Oh, the military certificate.
Yes, he receives his mandatory military reserve certificate, and under the line for father, it reads, Father not declared.
Legally, on paper, he is nobody's son.
Uh-huh.
And he knows exactly who his father is. He knows the man runs a successful dental practice in the capital. To see that blank space on a government document is a visceral invalidation of his existence.
So he takes a massive emotional risk. He convinces his aunt to drive him to Victoria. He just wants a hug. He has built up this cinematic reunion in his head.
He walks into the pristine dental clinic wearing his only decent clothes and tells the receptionist he is Dr. Odilon's son.
The receptionist looks terrified and scurries to the back.
The father emerges. He pulls down his medical mask. He looks at his 18-year-old biological son. And there is no warmth. There is only irritation.
The father says, look, I didn't want this meeting. I didn't want this relationship. Your mother caused me too much pain. And I ask you, please don't bring that relationship into my life. I don't want it.
It is the ultimate paralyzing rejection. It confirms every horrific thing his mother ever screamed at him. It validates the core thesis of his trauma. I am fundamentally unlovable and unwanted.
I want to stop you there, because as someone who studies entrepreneurs, I hear that rejection and I think, oh, this is the origin story.
Right, the classic narrative.
This is where he gets the chip on his shoulder. We love the narrative of the founder who was told they are worthless and they use that anger to build an empire. Isn't that desire to prove the father wrong an incredible source of motivation?
It is an incredibly powerful source of motivation, but it is what psychologists would call dark fuel.
Dark fuel. I like that.
Yeah, a chip on the shoulder will get your rocket off the launch pad faster than almost anything else. But dark fuel is highly corrosive. It burns dangerously hot, and eventually it destroys the engine it's powering.
Because the motivation is entirely external, right?
Exactly. When a hyperachiever is created by trauma, their success isn't about the joy of building something or serving a market. It's about constructing a shield.
So Chris walks into the elevator after that rejection, fighting back tears, and makes a solemn vow.
He vows to get a degree, secure a high-paying job, buy a house, get a car, and become undeniably successful. But not for his own happiness.
No. He wants to force his father to feel the agonizing regret of throwing away a son who turned out to be a massive success. He is going to use corporate achievement as a weapon of vengeance.
And that toxic mix of genuine newfound faith providing his moral compass and this dark fuel providing his ambition, well, it propels him into the business world.
Let's look at the hustle. Chris starts at the very bottom, working at a construction materials store before transitioning to selling precast concrete slabs for a local businessman.
The hustle is relentless. He doesn't have money for lunch. He doesn't have bus fare. He is walking miles across town under the blistering Brazilian sun, knocking on doors at construction sites, writing down phone numbers on scraps of paper.
He develops a meticulous, obsessive follow-up system. People start noticing this kid who simply refuses to stop working.
A manager named Silvino at a neighboring steel products company, Sedisa, sees Chris's grind and poaches him, offering him a job as a sales assistant.
And Chris practically moves into the office. He sleeps on a thin mat on the floor. His mother tries to send him lunch via a local bus driver, but Chris is so hyper-focused on calling clients that he forgets to pick it up, and the food just rides the bus all day.
He's outworking everyone in the building.
Okay.
And the defining moment of his early career comes when the branch manager goes on vacation.
This is a great story.
Standard procedure dictates that headquarters sends a senior supervisor to oversee the branch. But due to a scheduling error, no one is sent. Chris, a junior assistant, is left entirely alone to run the operation.
And then a massive corporate client who had been stalling on a major contract for 6 months finally calls, ready to negotiate.
Chris doesn't panic. He fields the call, navigates the pricing structure himself, closes the deal, and single-handedly breaks the branch's all-time sales record.
When headquarters finds out, they are stunned. He has proven his sheer competence.
But competence is common in the corporate world. What separates Chris during this ascent is how his spiritual awakening begins to dictate his business ethics.
His faith isn't just a Sunday activity, it becomes his operational framework. And there is a specific high-stakes moment that tests this framework.
This is where we see what he's really made of.
Right. Chris is engaged to his girlfriend, Camille. They are financially stretched to the breaking point. He's trying to support his mother and sister, pay for a wedding, and build a life. He manages to buy a beat-up used car.
Just a total clunker.
Yeah. One Saturday, he is washing the car in front of his house. To reach it with the hose, he needs to pull it forward a few feet. It's an old vehicle that runs on alcohol fuel, requiring a manual choke to start. He turns the key, the car lurches forward unexpectedly, and smashes directly into his neighbor's parked car.
It's a disaster. He has absolutely no margin for this kind of financial hit.
The neighbor, who is a wealthy and influential woman in the community, comes out to see the damage. She assesses the situation and offers a very pragmatic, modern solution.
She says, listen, my car is fully insured. Let's just tell the insurance company that I was backing up and I hit your car. They will cover the repair for both vehicles, and you won't have to pay a dime.
She is actively volunteering to participate in insurance fraud to help him out.
In the cutthroat culture of early career hustling, this is seen as a gift from the universe. It's a victimless white lie. The massive, faceless insurance corporation absorbs the cost, and Chris gets to keep his wedding savings intact.
But Chris stops, looks at her, and refuses. He says, "Thank you, but that is not how the accident happened. I wouldn't have any peace if I lied about it."
He explains that he has committed his life to a heavenly Father whose very character is defined by truth, and he refuses to contradict that character over a car repair.
He assumes the debt entirely. Let's contextualize this. We live in an era dominated by the Silicon Valley ethos of move fast and break things. Hustle culture often glorifies the ethical shortcut, exaggerating revenue, lying about capabilities to secure funding, stepping on competitors.
Chris does the exact opposite. He chooses the structural integrity of his character over a short-term financial lifeline.
And the return on investment for that integrity is staggering. Camille eventually tells her father, Itamar, about the incident.
Now, Itamar is a highly successful, deeply discerning businessman. When he hears that his future son-in-law chose crippling debt over a convenient lie, his perspective on Chris shifts completely.
He says, "This is the kind of man my daughter can marry. A man with values like this will inevitably be successful."
Itamar is inspecting the foundation of the skyscraper. He doesn't care about Chris's current bank balance. He sees that the concrete of his character is flawless.
Based on that singular act of integrity, Itamar decides to invest in them. He tells Chris to sell the dented car and use the cash to furnish their home. Itamar then provides them with a fully renovated house to live in rent-free and buys Camille a vehicle.
Chris's refusal to compromise his ethics literally unlocked the capital and provision he needed to launch his family life.
This solidifies a core thesis of his future coaching methodology. Integrity is the ultimate long-term growth strategy.
And this reputation for unwavering honesty accelerates his career. He's recruited by D. Dalla, one of the largest steel companies in the state. He spends a decade there, systematically crushing sales quotas.
Eventually, the company owner, Ronaldo, offers him a massive promotion to become a branch manager. But there's a catch. It's for the branch in Campos dos Goitacazes in the state of Rio de Janeiro.
It is the branch everyone avoids. It is notoriously difficult, financially struggling, and culturally toxic.
While Chris is waiting for the paperwork to clear, he attends a church prayer meeting. During the service, someone approaches him and shares a prophetic vision.
They tell Chris, "I see before you a great challenge, a dry and hardened field. But in the center, there is a powerful water pump. I saw you drawing water with all your strength, watering the dry earth. In the end, that barren field transformed into a beautiful, blossoming garden."
In any corporate context, a dry and hardened field perfectly describes an underperforming market with a burnt-out workforce.
Exactly. The brilliant thing Chris does is map this spiritual vision directly onto his management strategy.
How does he actually do that? Because it's easy to say, "I'm going to water the garden," but what does that look like when a sales rep misses their quota?
It completely changes his daily operations.
Mm.
Most managers entering a failing branch act like lumberjacks. They start cutting dead weight, firing underperformers, and slashing budgets to artificially inflate margins.
Right, the standard corporate playbook.
Chris walks in acting like a cultivator. He realizes his role as the water pump means he has to supply the emotional and professional resources his team is lacking. He institutes deep listening.
He sits down with struggling employees not to threaten their jobs, but to understand what resources they are missing. He implements extreme accountability, but pairs it with extreme support.
He views leadership as an act of service, pouring his own energy into the team's development.
And the metric shift is undeniable. Over 3 years, he doesn't just stabilize the branch. He turns it into the highest performing division in the entire company. It boasts the highest profit margins and the lowest operating costs.
This marks a massive evolution in his leadership style. Remember, his childhood trained him to be a lone wolf. He survived by trusting no one and fighting for himself.
But applying his faith to his business forced him to realize that true scale requires empowering others. He had to learn how to trust his team, and more importantly, how to make his team trust him.
So he turns the branch around. He buys a beautiful home. He has the executive title, the company car, the respect of his peers.
He has achieved every single metric of success he outlined in that elevator at age 18. He has built the mansion.
And this is precisely when the structural cracks in the foundation finally give way.
Chris hits age 38, and he spirals into a massive identity crisis. The dark fuel finally runs out.
This is the terrifying reality of the hyperachiever trap. Think about it like a psychological autoimmune disease.
Okay.
The very defense mechanism that kept Chris alive and propelled him to the top, his relentless need to prove his worth through achievement, suddenly starts attacking the host.
Wow.
When your entire identity is predicated on acquiring external validation to soothe an internal wound, what happens when you acquire everything and the wound still bleeds?
You look around your beautiful corporate mansion and realize the man you built it for, the father who rejected you, isn't there to see it. And even if you were, it wouldn't change the past.
The dissonance between his perfect external life and his agonizing internal emptiness breaks his psyche. He starts asking, who am I now? What is the point of all this profit? Why do I even exist?
The goal he spent 20 years chasing turns out to be a mirage.
He begins to actively self-destruct. He stops caring about the job. He starts staying out all night at bars, drinking heavily, surrounding himself with toxic influences.
He is sabotaging his career and deeply wounding his marriage. He feels entirely unworthy of his own success, so he is trying to burn it all down to return to the familiar chaos of his childhood.
It is a classic trauma response. When peace feels unearned, chaos feels like home. It reaches a breaking point where he decides to abandon his family. He packs a backpack and prepares to walk out on Camille and his life.
But Camille is an absolute force of nature. During this dark period, she has a vivid dream. She tells Chris, I dreamed of a bridge, and on the other side of the bridge, I saw you. You were broken, desperate, and begging me not to give up on you.
That dream changes her entire approach to his rebellion. She doesn't see an arrogant, cheating executive. She sees the terrified 4-year-old boy from the basement crying out for help. Her empathy overrides her anger.
On the night he finally decides to leave, Camille secretly unzips his backpack and slides a Bible inside. Chris checks into a cheap hotel room. He gets drunk.
He is sitting on the bed, feeling the crushing weight of total failure. He opens his bag to look for something, and he sees the Bible.
It functions as a spiritual mirror.
He describes it as scales falling from his eyes. He is suddenly hit with the absolute madness of what he is doing. He is destroying the beautiful family he always wanted because he had forgotten his core identity.
He wasn't a rejected orphan trying to impress a ghost. He was an adopted son of a heavenly father. He picks up the phone, calls Camille in tears, and she, displaying radical grace, tells him to come meet her at her parents' house.
When he arrives, his father-in-law, Itamar, the man who originally saw his integrity, doesn't lecture him. He embraces him.
Itamar says, no one is going to destroy what God has built. I forgive you. That grace stops the free fall. But Chris realizes that to truly secure his foundation, he has to face the origin of the crack. He has to confront his biological father.
This is where the story elevates from a business biography to a masterclass in emotional intelligence. Chris's sister, Jamil, arranges a meeting. Chris and Camille drive to the father's apartment.
Walk us through the psychology of this moment, because Chris is basically walking back into the lion's den.
The last time he saw this man, he was brutally discarded. Chris is physically shaking as he waits in the living room. His brain's amygdala is screaming at him that he is about to be attacked. He hears his father's footsteps, and he expects to feel the familiar rush of anger and shame.
But instead, as the father walks into the room, Chris is suddenly enveloped by an overwhelming supernatural wave of peace and love.
Before the father can even begin to speak or defend himself, Chris looks at him and says, I'm here to add, not divide. If you want to talk about the past, that's okay. But if you don't, then our story begins today. I don't want to dwell on the past anymore.
I'm here to add, not divide. Think about the immense emotional security required to say that to your abuser.
True forgiveness is the ultimate act of leadership. It is relinquishing the desire to punish someone for how they broke you.
His father is stunned. He simply replies, that's fine. On their first Father's Day together shortly after, Chris makes a poster board filled with photos of his life, his wedding, his career milestones, his wife, all the things the father chose to miss.
But across the top, Chris writes, our story starts now. And this stoic, distant German man breaks down sobbing.
Chris didn't just heal himself in that room. He performed an emotional rescue on his father. His father had been trapped in a psychological prison of guilt for 40 years, too ashamed to bridge the gap.
By offering unmerited forgiveness, Chris liberated him.
If you are an executive or a manager listening to this right now, I want you to really think about this dynamic. How many toxic boardrooms are driven by unresolved family trauma?
When you see a CEO mercilessly berating a VP over a minor accounting error, are they actually yelling at the VP, or are they yelling at the father who told them they would never amount to anything?
The corporate world is littered with the collateral damage of unforgiven childhoods. Until Chris forgave his father, his entire operational identity was rejected son. That is a defensive posture. You view every negotiation as a battle for your worth.
After the forgiveness, his identity shifted to beloved, secure son. He no longer needed a quarterly profit report to justify his right to exist. He could lead from a place of peace rather than a place of deficit.
And what's truly astonishing is that this emotional and spiritual healing runs parallel to a series of physical medical miracles in his family.
We have to touch on this because it underscores the level of faith that drives his coaching today.
Early in their marriage, Camille was diagnosed with severe lupus. The treatments led to massive weight gain, requiring bariatric surgery. Doctors told them pregnancy was a near impossibility.
And when she finally does conceive, it's an ectopic pregnancy, a life-threatening emergency.
She is rushed to the hospital with severe internal hemorrhaging. The surgeon comes out to the waiting room and tells Chris that she needs surgery immediately, but there is a massive problem.
Camille has O-negative blood, which is rare, and the hospital's blood bank is completely empty.
The doctor gives Chris a horrific choice: operate without blood and risk her dying on the table from shock, or wait for a blood transfer from another city and risk her bleeding to death internally.
It is the ultimate test of his newly found peace.
Operating from this deep well of faith, Chris tells the surgeon to proceed without the blood. The surgeon asks him 3 separate times to confirm, warning him of the likely fatal outcome. Chris insists, trusting God.
The surgeon agrees and turns to walk back to the OR. In that exact moment, a nurse comes sprinting down the hallway. 2 bags of O-negative blood had inexplicably just arrived at the hospital from an untracked source.
A literal statistical impossibility that saves her life.
Camille survives, but loses a fallopian tube. Further testing reveals Chris has a sperm mortality rate of 90%. The medical establishment officially closes the door on them having biological children.
Yet, a year later, against every medical odd, they welcome a daughter, Lais. Chris calls her the miracle of love. 2 years after that, a second daughter, Sarah, is born. His 2 Snow Whites.
And beautifully, around this exact time, the Brazilian courts finally grant Chris the legal right to bear his father's last name. At age 38, he officially becomes Chris Storck.
The narrative arc here is breathtaking. The cracks in the foundation are filled, the name is reclaimed, the medical curses are broken, his identity is entirely secure.
Which sets the stage for the final act of our deep dive. With his internal world finally healed, Chris realizes that his external world, the corporate steel industry, no longer fits him.
The ambition that got him to the executive suite was fueled by pain. With the pain gone, the ambition needs a new target.
The catalyst for this massive pivot happens around 2017, driven by 3 distinct events that completely rewire his professional worldview. First, his mother passes away from Alzheimer's disease.
Their relationship had remained incredibly complicated. Chris realizes that during his corporate ascent, he had tried to fix their broken bond by simply throwing money at it.
He paid her bills, bought her things, ensuring she was comfortable. But standing at her deathbed, he is hit with a brutal epiphany. He writes, "Financial help at the end of the month was no substitute for the affection that was missing."
That is a staggering realization for any business leader. How many executives justify their perpetual absence from their spouses and children by pointing to the size of the house they provide?
Chris realizes that presence is the only currency that actually matters in human relationships.
The second event occurs during a trip to San Diego to visit his half-siblings, Jamil and Brian. Growing up in the basement, Chris always harbored a quiet resentment toward them.
He viewed them as the privileged kids who got to live with the father and enjoy his wealth. But sitting on Imperial Beach watching the sunset, they open up to him.
He learns that their father was physically present in their home, but emotionally paralyzed by the secret guilt of having abandoned Chris.
It perfectly illustrates the blast radius of trauma. Trauma doesn't just damage the direct victim, it sends a shockwave through the entire familial ecosystem.
Chris realizes his siblings were starving for the same emotional connection he was, just in a nicer house. This shatters his victim mentality and deeply expands his capacity for empathy.
The third catalyst happens back in his professional life. Chris looks at his MBA and realizes that while it taught him how to optimize supply chains and balance spreadsheets, it taught him absolutely nothing about the human soul.
To be the leader his team actually needed, he had to understand people. So he dives into executive coaching. He enrolls in massive courses with institutions like SB Coaching and Fabrasis, which are some of the largest, most prestigious coaching organizations in Latin America.
During one of these intensive seminars, an instructor leads a visualization exercise about living a life with purpose, directly referencing Rick Warren's famous book, The Purpose-Driven Life.
The concept strikes Chris like lightning. He reads the entire book in 40 days, and he has an epiphany that alters the trajectory of his life. His true calling isn't selling steel. His true calling is building people.
He decides to merge his hardcore corporate experience, his psychological coaching training, and his deep spiritual faith into a unified system. He creates a mentorship program called 12 Steps to a Life with Purpose.
And this is where we see the absolute genius of his integration. He doesn't quit his job to go preach on a corner. He turns his corporate branch into a laboratory for human development.
Let's talk about the specific mechanics of this, because it's brilliant. Instead of holding standard soul-crushing sales meetings where he berates reps for missing margins, he offers his team something radical.
He invites them to stay after hours for voluntary, free sessions on emotional intelligence and purpose discovery.
He takes the 12 steps framework, which involves identifying core wounds, practicing radical forgiveness, aligning daily actions with long-term spiritual vision, and redefining success beyond mere capital accumulation. And he walks his steel sales reps through it.
He is treating them as holistic, complex human beings, not just cogs in a revenue-generating machine. And the results, they're explosive.
Chris goes on a vacation, and the senior supervisor sent to cover the branch is completely bewildered. The entire organizational climate has shifted. The energy is electric.
The reps are collaborating, taking extreme ownership of their accounts, and the profit margins are soaring. Why? Because an employee who understands their personal life purpose is infinitely more resilient and motivated than an employee who is just trying to hit a quota to avoid getting fired.
He proved that empathy and emotional intelligence are not soft, optional HR initiatives. They are hardcore, high-yielding operational strategies.
As his reputation as a coach grows, he starts taking on external entrepreneurs. And his methodology is fascinating because he is incredibly empathetic, but he is completely intolerant of excuses.
He refuses to let struggling founders view themselves as victims of circumstance or the economy.
And he holds the ultimate trump card for that tough love. If a founder complains that the market is unfair, Chris can say, "I was born asphyxiated, my twin was killed in front of me, my mother told me I was worthless, my father abandoned me, and I lived in a rat-infested basement. Do not talk to me about unfair."
He strips away the illusion of victimhood and forces them to take absolute agency over their future.
He constantly challenges them with the specific mantra, "Good is the enemy of great," which is the arch-enemy of extraordinary.
He identifies that most entrepreneurs fail not because they hit rock bottom, but because they get comfortable in the good. They build a business that pays the bills, they get comfortable, and they lose the fire for the extraordinary purpose they were meant to fulfill.
Which brings us to the ultimate application of his own teaching, the bold exit.
It's the year 2020. The global pandemic hits. Chris is at the absolute zenith of his corporate career. He has just inaugurated a massive state-of-the-art branch for D-Dalla. He is living in his literal dream mansion. He has the ultimate executive package.
But the internal fire for the corporate game has completely extinguished. He has climbed the mountain, looked at the view, and realized he is on the wrong mountain.
Amidst the chaos of the pandemic lockdowns, he receives a phone call from his father-in-law, Itamar. Itamar is isolated at his rural farm, deeply distressed as he watches friends pass away from the virus. He makes a simple, almost childlike request. He asks Chris to come up to the farm and ride ATVs with him.
In the grand scheme of corporate deal-making, it's a trivial request. But for Chris, it acts as a clarifying lens.
He realizes that the people he loves actually need his physical and emotional presence, not his corporate prestige.
He hangs up the phone, calls Ronaldo, the owner of the steel company, and after 27 years of climbing the ladder, he resigns. He walks away from the peak of his career.
Eventually, he and Camille even sell the mansion, realizing that God was calling them to a simpler, entirely mission-driven life.
He launches Elevami Treinamentos, his own training and coaching company, dedicating his life fully to mentoring others. He also becomes an international speaker for ADOPMEP, the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International, traveling the world to explain how to integrate faith and corporate leadership.
I want to propose an analogy here. For 27 years, Chris viewed his childhood trauma as a heavy padlock. It was this massive rusted lock keeping him out of the normal life of happiness and security that everyone else seemed to have.
He spent decades trying to pick that lock with money, with promotions, with raw hustle.
But the profound realization of his journey is that the trauma wasn't the lock, it was the key.
Yes. His specific pain, his specific experience in the basement, the specific agony of paternal rejection that was the exact shape of the key he was meant to forge. And he was meant to use it to unlock the potential of other broken, struggling leaders.
The most effective mentors in the world aren't the ones who are born in the penthouse and lived a life of uninterrupted success. The best mentors are the ones who can walk a struggling entrepreneur out of the dark basement because they built the stairs themselves with their bare hands while bleeding.
Chris's leadership is so potent because he views every single business challenge through the lens of profound human survival and spiritual redemption.
Let's pull all of this together. The arc of Chris Storck is nothing short of miraculous. He went from a rejected, asphyxiated twin in a termite-infested basement to an aggressive street fighter.
He transformed that rage into the dark fuel of a relentless corporate executive fighting for validation from a ghost.
And when that validation proved to be hollow, he stood on the edge of losing everything he had built.
But through the radical, prophetic intervention of his wife, a profound encounter with the Heavenly Father, and the immense courage to execute extreme forgiveness toward his biological father, he entirely repaired his cracked foundation. He healed his identity. And he weaponized that healed identity to become a master coach.
It stands as absolute proof that your origin story does not dictate your destination, provided you are willing to do the agonizing, necessary work of internal excavation.
So we want to turn the spotlight on you, the listener. Take a hard look at your own career drive this week. Why do you work the hours you work? Are you running toward a deeply held purpose? Or are you running away from a past rejection? Are you trying to prove a point to someone who isn't even looking?
If you are burning dark fuel, recognize that the clock is ticking on your engine. And more practically, how can you apply Chris's methods to your own organization? Can you implement deep listening? Can you view your team as individuals on a purpose journey rather than just line items on a payroll spreadsheet?
We want to leave you with one final, incredibly provocative thought. At the very end of his autobiography, Chris uses a phrase to describe his life's mission that is absolutely haunting. He says his goal is plundering hell to populate heaven.
Plundering hell to populate heaven. What a mandate.
What if the darkest, most traumatic basement moments of your life, the failures, the bankruptcies, the family rejections, the things you aggressively hide from your polished LinkedIn profile, what if those are actually the exact credentials you need to mentor, guide, or save someone else in your industry today?
Your pain isn't just a record of your past. If properly healed, it becomes your most powerful tool for leadership.
If your foundation is cracked, you don't have to tear the whole building down. You just have to be brave enough to go back down to the basement, turn on the light, and start pouring new concrete. Once that foundation is secure, there's absolutely no limit to how high the skyscraper can go.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take a look at your foundation this week. We'll see you next time.